All right, hey everybody, I have something for you today that I hope you'll enjoy. Kind of something I've been thinking about a little bit recently about how liberty messaging seems to be much less effective than we think it should be, right? So, also I'm testing out my new camera, which should have better resolution, so you get to more pixels of my stupid face. Anyway, so So the problem with some libertarian messaging or some liberty messaging, right? There's no shortage of all the libertarian idea men out there that you can think of, from hardcore anarchists to slightly softer but still really strongly, solidly libertarian voices. There's a lot of them all across the internet, and a lot of them have simple, consistent messaging. These people are, and if I think about like the hardcore anarchists in particular, right? Like, you're going to get really simple, really consistent messaging from some of them, and it's going to be great if you're already kind of in agreement. These people are great for those who are ready, not even necessarily agreeing, but people who are ready for the message, whatever that means, right? And of course, in addition to that, some preaching to the choir is both good and desirable. We want to remind people what the philosophical ideals are of libertarianism and of anarchism, right? And for those people, may Rothbard's spirit smile down upon them, either figuratively or literally, whichever you prefer. So the problem is this: despite their simplicity, despite their consistency, despite their argumentation, they don't seem to convince large swaths of people, and of course that's very distressing to anyone who values liberty, right? Hardcore libertarians, including anarchists, represent maybe, 1 in 100 people, if that, right? So, and like all of these writings, all of these anarchist and liberty writings and philosophy are freely and widely available. We have great organizations like the Mises Institute, the Libertarian Institute. There's that website where I got the copy of Spooner's No Treason. I can't remember, like praxeology.net or something like that. I don't know. You can go look at that old video if you want. But like, the more I see this, more it seems like it's not just a simple education problem, right? I mean, number one, are all these things being freely widely available actually hurting their reach, like their actual like mental reach? Should we be monetizing our thoughts, our ideas more? Not like Hillary Clinton, where we sell out to some big bank or something like that, but where we charge reasonable fees for access to certain things. Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom is a good example of a monetized version of spreading out libertarian thought, but even that hasn't had, I think, a lot of real bite into non-libertarian people. The problem that I think we kind of have to face is that a lot of people find this messaging on its own not very compelling. And one of the charges that we have to fight against as libertarians often, even anarchists awesome, is that, we have to avoid charges that we're utopian. And in order to avoid utopianism in all of its meanings, we have to accept people as they are, and not as we hope that they would be if only they didn't go to government schools. There are two groups that we have to worry about. There are those who wish to rule and those who wish to be ruled, even a little bit, right? So let's tackle the first group first, because this is easier. Those who wish to rule, those who are intent on becoming rulers, becoming heads of government, heads of state, they're already usually suspect from an anarchist perspective, morally, rationally. These are people who want to aggress against others and just want an excuse for it. And we have to remember and remind people who aren't these people who want to be ruled that people who rule are incentivized to be the worst people, and that's Hayek. That's not even a hardcore libertarian. That's a fairly squishy welfare libertarian, right? Think about it this way: in what has it been, like 250 some years, 250-ish years, almost 250, right? Because 1776, almost 250 years since the Declaration of Independence, And 1789 would be 1789 would be the Constitution, right? So that is the ratification. So in that 200 plus years, we've seen the chief executive of the nation, of the country, of the state, devolve from a competent decision maker that's respected by everybody, even those who disagree with him, into like a barely conscious lumpen puppet that's controlled by the bureaucracy. This is something where there's not really, over such a long period of time, you can't really expect any sense of, noblesse oblige to keep the chief executive from devolving into this kind of thing that we have today. So we can kind of write off those who wish to rule. Those are the people who we need to defend ourselves and those we care about from, right? Those are the people who are trying to, as I said earlier, get power and use it on people. Now, the bigger group, and the group that we actually need to really think about, is the group of people who wish to be ruled. And in general, people are on our side are willing to say, well, they're suffering from a bunch of misconceptions. And so let's look over that for a second. What are the possible misconceptions that these people who wish to be ruled hold? Well, they'll say things like, well, we need a government to keep everything from going crazy, right? And it's been shown, I think, reasonably well philosophically that you could have non-coercive institutions take the place of the state because there's no magic angels in the state that make it do what needs to be done. All of these things could be done by voluntary contracts. It's just they're not. And to a lot of people, especially those who wish to rule, it's more convenient for them that it's not, right? And, there are also people, especially now, who are really kind of... It's difficult to explain. I've been trying to figure out a good way to explain it, but, people who really, really go full in on that Hobbesian state of nature, and I want to get back to this a little bit later, but the Hobbesian state of nature is one extreme, and I think that it's reasonable to say that the real state of nature is not really that extreme. I'll get into that more in a second, but the real thing that I think gets people the most, and I don't know why I put this last, but this is the real sticker for a lot of people, is that a lot of people believe that some, not all, of their government institutions are both good and effective. I mean, there's the people who are like, I like my public library, I like my local police, my town schools are decent. Well, that's great, but what keeps them good? Luck? Hope? Dreams? Prayers? I don't know. The obvious retort to this kind of perspective is that incentives are the key to making these good institutions last for a long time. If we don't have good incentives, if we create the worst possible incentives, that these institutions are places for sociopaths to go to lord their status over other people and give them orders, then, the fact that your institution is good now is no indication that it's going to stay good. And I'm reminded of Thomas Paine from The Crisis, #1, or sometimes it's also called The American Crisis, right? Quote, "If there must be trouble, let it be in my day, that my child may have peace." Well, to all the people who believe that their government, that their coercive institutions or coercively funded institutions are good and effective, that is there but for the grace of God go you, right? They are, as long as those institutions are coercively funded, coercively operated, they will have a tendency, inevitably, to become bad and ineffective. And really, I think that there's not enough, banging on this particular issue. Incentives matter, and they matter long term, and we really want to think about these things in the long term. We don't want to depend, like Edmund Burke, on happening to have a fairly decent king right now, right? That's not a good strategy long term. And if you want to care about your own children, or even if you want to care about other people's children, making sure that they don't end up in a situation where the stake gets larger and larger and larger forever is something that you want to try to avoid. So the question I want to pose to you guys, to the audience, is this. Are we suffering from too much base level theory, the easy stuff, and not enough ideas on how to get closer to that good stuff without necessarily destroying these institutions. Because there's a lot of libertarian firebrands on the internet. That's what the internet is for. It's for firebranding. You know, everybody's a tough guy. Everybody's like, well, we just got to abolish this, abolish this, abolish this. And realistically, talking about abolishing institutions that people like is more likely to turn them away from you than to get them on your side. So what we really need to think about is how, for these institutions that happen to be good-ish right now, how do we convert these coercive institutions into voluntary ones? And maybe we should talk more about that. This is something I've been trying to talk more about myself, so hopefully I'm leading a little bit by example. I'd love if any of you had thoughts or other content creators who are also kind of going along this path. Because we need to remain principled, but at the same time we need to not pretend that not tell people that everything that they actually do like about their government has to be destroyed before it can be rebuilt. Because that's not strictly necessary, right? Like, you can imagine a non-coercive institution becoming coercive by doing some bad things. And it could be coercive in a little way, like somebody flubbed a report to somebody else, which led them to assess a fine on someone, which they were authorized to do, but they did it for the wrong reason. I mean, you could call that coercive, but if they fix it, or if the person who made the mistake they figure it out and they fix the problem, then they can go back to a non-coercive institution. And I'm not saying that this is like an easy thing to do, right? Like converting your public library to a private institution might be easy-ish compared to converting your police station to a non-coercive institution. I'm not saying this is going to be easy, but what we really need to offer is a roadmap to convert the what institutions that are good from coercive to voluntary. We need to convert social contracts, Rousseauian garbage, into real contracts, Rothbardian Chad something. I don't know. I mean, I think I have some writings or a video on what's wrong with social contracts. I'll put that in the description. And if I don't, I'll make another video because this is worth talking about. Because social contracts are really bad in a lot of obvious ways that imply that no sane person would ever sign one, right? So that's why they have to imply that we signed it, because no one would ever sign the thing that they're telling us we signed. But with that said, that kind of we want to maybe there's something valuable in moving in this direction as far as our rhetoric. I want to talk a little bit about the state of nature, because a lot of people do fear the state of nature, and there's a lot of people like on the right authoritarian side who are using their goodness gracious, the exact opposite of Hobbesian, similar letters, different names, different guys, Hobbesian thoughts on the state of nature. They're using it to justify authoritarianism, often from the right, but also often from the left, right? We need a king because we really need to not let ourselves get into this state of war against all. And the thing is that the state of nature, properly speaking, really isn't a war of all against all. It might be a war for the first few minutes, but what will quickly happen is that the weaker parties in this war of all against all will swear service or fealty, however you want to call it, to conquerors, right? The fact is that a really a better way to describe the state of nature is might makes right. And so, like, having a king or a dictator or any other coercive government, really what that is might makes right, but with extra steps. Maybe you get to vote on things. Maybe the king has a document that he pledges to, support this particular subset of your liberties while maintaining a grip on, your ownership of this, that, or the other. And having read some Locke, I haven't read all of Locke, but having read some Locke, what it seems to me that he really wanted, and what people who were his followers failed to achieve, was government by consent, government as an agent for the people, for the individuals. An organization like that is is a voluntary contractual organization. So, what can we do? Well, aside from trying to, on the philosophical perspective, we can start thinking more about how to convert what good institutions there are today from coercive to non-coercive institutions. That would be a big help, because right now a lot of people are like, well, what are we going to do? Throw away this organization, throw away that organization? We'll all go, everything will be crazy. And if you can give a good explanation of how a coercively funded police station can be converted to a privately funded security organization, then you've got something there, right? You've got something that can be useful for people who are further away from the fence than we are, right? I mean, but okay, from there, what else can we do? Well, we can support and try to enforce the idea of government as agent by consent. For instance, statements that the agent, thinking about things this way, right? Like, if the government is our agent, then the government does not actually own the assets that he manages. Therefore, a proper government that is acting as agent allows secession. If the government is not serving, or if people believe that it's not serving their interests under most circumstances, assuming that they're not currently under investigation for criminal activity, for instance, let them go. Let them take their things. Let them take their land. Just the fact that good governments would gain people and bad governments would lose people would already be a big incentive towards government that serves people, that serves the people that it works for, as opposed to government ruling over the people that it rules over. I mean, if you can't claim, I don't like this and I'm going my own way, then you really don't own the land that you think you own. You're just a long-term leaser. Other things that we can, I mean, that's pretty advanced, right? Secession is still pretty far away. It's kind of starting to get a little bit of a bit of talk here and there in the really far anarchist chunks of the internet. But what else can we do right now? You can do things like nullification. You can do things like civil disobedience. You can work with agorism or parallel economies. You can figure out legal loopholes and avoid taxation. There's a lot of things that you can do that can help make the government closer to an organization that is voluntary. And the people who want to just overthrow everything, the strategic error that they're making is assuming that in the absence of the current government, a Rothbardian paradise would ensue, which is not likely to be the case. So that's kind of my thoughts about where I'd like to take my liberty messaging, and where I think people who are also into liberty messaging should maybe try to go, if they want, is into this, kind of radical secessionism. Government as agent, government as voluntary, consented agent. Covenant societies, Hoppian stuff. And to talk more about this as opposed to saying taxation is theft is not convincing to anybody who's not already a libertarian, because the average person hears taxation is theft and thinks, well, I mean, taxation pays for the roads, it pays for the library, it pays for the police. We want these things to exist. The question is what form we want them to exist in and how we want them to be funded, and how people think that they can be funded. So, I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts. I wanted to talk about this week just because it felt like something I was ready to talk about. So, yeah, if you gain something from this, I hope it'll, help direct your, the way that you spread your message, if you do spread your message. If you have anything you'd like to cover, feel free to drop me an email, mnh@marginalnonhermit.com. MNH stands for Marginal Non-Hermit. Anything that you'd like me to cover, drop me a line. But, that's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I, gave you a little bit of food for thought. Trying to get a little bit better about being more regular with this. The Rothbard thing is going well. I just finished my notes for the second part of Chapter 3. So we'll be covering that as soon as I can sit down and actually make the video. Trying to get my office into a better state for actually making videos. I really do think that having a cooler background helps. I don't know. Maybe I'm being silly about it. But it'd be really nice if I could get good sound quality in there, at least compared to what I have here. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for thinking about the stuff that I'm talking about. And I hope to see you next time. Have a great week.